Okay, this is episode 44 of Counterpoints, and my fofo gonna make sure none of your kids grow. Please don't sue me or take the video down for copyright infringement, whoever owns the lyrics and material of Tupac Shakur, the dead one. So,
dead now, of course.
Yeah, dead now, of course. Gone too soon, some would say. Actually died before Counter-Strike even came out, so he doesn't even know what Counter-Strike is. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what his opinion would have been. So... this episode, though, if you want to show the world what will happen, as Tupac can't because he doesn't know about Counter-Strike or esports, you could go to esportspools and pick the teams you think will win. Because here's one of the reasons why this tournament, EPICENTER, is actually a pretty good event if you wanted to make a bet. Is because I want to start out with this. I think this has one of the best formats I've seen. Okay. Caveat, not the wildcard thing. I don't know what that logic is, but whatever.
I was about to say, this is interesting. Where are you going to go with this?
They've made that like a ridiculous freak fight where in theory none of the wildcard underdogs should win. You know, it's fairly obvious who should win. But once you get to the actual groups, okay, right, remember the reason, Moses, that people always tell us we can't have a GSL with best of three in all the games is, logistics, we haven't got the time for that. We haven't got, event organisers of the world, have a look at EPICENTER. It only runs for a week, and they have got full GSL, best of three in all the group games. And, listen, I realise as I say that, maybe there'll be delays and problems, which is why people normally don't do it. But at least they're going to give it a try. So when you consider this, okay, two factors together, Semmler. Not only do they have best of threes in every match in the group stage, so every game's going to be like you can't upset someone, basically. Because if you win a full best of three, as I say, it's usually not an upset. You probably had to really outplay someone. But combine that with this detail, when I tell you this. If FaZe and Team Liquid get into the tournament through the wildcard thing, they will literally have all 7 of my top 7 in the world rankings in those groups.
Me.
No, think how sick that is, though. That basically is the formula to have possibly the best tournament, where you started out with best of threes.
I know. I like it. I was just giving you shit.
The only way to top this is double elimination in the playoff brackets. But you're right. Lots of best of three.
I will tell you. Wait, say that again. I wasn't listening to you. What's up?
He was saying the only way he thinks you can top it is if you made the playoff bracket double elim. But I'm just saying no one's going to do that in CS, unfortunately.
Yeah, you've been to those tournaments, Semmler. We did that ESEA event. Remember that back in the day? Where they had double elimination throughout the entire thing, and it was just 3 straight days of 15-hour casts.
It's all so hazy. I know there's a reason why I don't remember this.
Yeah, those days are brutal. But no, I mean, you would ideally like that, but that is where it extends the format to like a 2-week event. I think the only thing that could make this format better is I don't like that the GSL goes directly into the semifinals. I would like to see quarterfinals, personally.
Which is actually what they did. See, that's what's different that they did last year. Last year they had best of 2s, but they made it so top 3 got out, and then you had a round of 6 that went into a semis. Although I have to say, in general, that's one thing I've always hated is when you can skip to a semis, and then if you win the group or whatever, because that always never made sense.
Yeah.
Was it at the event last year where like one group had like all 4 teams in the group were like tied?
Yeah.
And it was
this is the genius of it, Moses. So what happened is, because they were all tied, they went a round difference, right? So here's the genius scenario that happened. So the team that was top of the group, which I believe was actually Navi, they got to go to the semis, even though they'd won 3 maps, lost 3 maps. The team that went out of the group, NIP, due to have not enough round difference, had won 3 maps, lost 3 maps. And the teams that went to the quarterfinals had won 3 maps and lost 3 maps. So at that point in time, it's like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever, this format, does it?
I think the same thing happened to NIP.
Wasn't it?
No. That was the last EPICENTER.
No, that was last EPICENTER. My bad. Yeah. So we were talking about something else. I always remember this happening when it comes down to round difference with NIP. But go ahead, Moses. Sorry.
I think the same thing happened to them in the next event in Pro League finals in Brazil. I think NIP got screwed on some kind of round robin format. Either way, it doesn't matter. But yeah, no, this format is absolutely sick. Just because even I don't even mind the wild cards, just because it gives us a chance to see some teams that you normally wouldn't. And I don't want to brush over them too much because I actually think that Liquid Vegas squadron could be I don't want to say it's going to be like some kind of upset. I still think Liquid's going to win it, but I think Vega can actually do some damage. I think they have some good talent on that team, especially when you consider the CIS region in general. It goes pretty deep in terms of their squad. So I think that could actually turn into an exciting series. But yeah, no, these are the kind of groups that you want to play out, the best of 3 all the way through. And I don't think there's any clear weakness in either group, as long as there's not upsets in the wild card, except for maybe Virtus Pro. That scares me.
I was wondering when we were going to get Virtus Pro in here.
By the way, a detail that people actually don't realize, which I have to give Epicenter credit for. So everyone in the West has memed on Epicenter and ES Force and it's all just the same company that owns it, right? Do you know the reason why Vega Squadron are playing in that wildcard match, Moses?
Didn't they beat Na'Vi, actually?
Yeah, they want to qualify it. It would have been Na'Vi there. So that means they didn't just invite Na'Vi, even though Na'Vi's owned by ES Force for the publishing rights or whatever. So I'll give credit to Epicenter. Actually, I mean, listen, you could definitely criticize them for inviting Virtus Pro, but I will say I think Virtus Pro were one of the first names they announced, actually. So at least that was, that still doesn't match up in terms of time. They were obviously bad even when they announced them, but that means they didn't just invite all these teams that in theory, they could at this point in time. They invited some and they didn't invite others. And also, as I'm just referenced there, you can't look at the wildcard and actually be like, oh, they've just invited a shit local team. No, that would have been Na'Vi. It's not their fault Na'Vi lost the fucking qualifier, is it?
There's 2 scenarios for how this played out, right? It's they flipped a coin. So which of the teams that we own are we going to invite? And Virtus Pro just happened to be the one that showed up on heads there. The other side of it is, well, we can invite VP because it might be fuzzy enough where it's a Polish team. If we invite Na'Vi, it's going to be too blatant. Too much favoritism, too blatant. But if we invite VP, well, it's a Polish team, right? And then obviously Na'Vi will beat everybody else in the CIS qualifier and we'll get our cake and eat it too. Only problem is they got the icing on the cake. Turns out it was shit inside the icing. Layer of shit.
So you're saying Epicenter made a shit cake?
They made a shit cake and they got to eat it because Na'Vi let them down.
Why did they have to eat it at the end? Why don't they just go? I thought in his analogy,
that's it. You get your cake and you eat it too. That's the whole thing.
No, but that's the mad part. I know what you're trying to work with. That just doesn't really work, right? Because here's the thing: your analogy was perfect at the point at which they just look at the cake and they go, "What's this inside? Oh, it's all shit. I can't eat it now." But in your analogy, they're just like 2 girls, 1 cup. They're like, this shitty cake is so delicious. Like, why are they eating it at that point if they've seen it's shit? Even if they started to eat it, they're going to stop, aren't they? They're not going to go, let's keep going.
We got this nothing left to do but eat it. I guess this shit cake that we have here in front of us.
Well, that is it. They booked the venue. They've got everything rolling. Otherwise it's just like, we'll have another qualifier. But that's not happening. Okay. That's not happening.
I think a little bit more realistically as well to move away from the shit cake.
Moses, here's the scenario. You just set up the wrong one there. Okay, you're right. The one that's most likely to happen is maybe Vega could upset Team Liquid, right? It's unlikely because it's a best of 3 again. But here's the thing no one's thought about. Imagine how much it kills the entire hype of the event if Ty Lue just did some miracle upset over FaZe. So that whole thing of they're undefeated in 2 events. Will they be the new dominant team? And then Ty Lue's just with Bondic and Peacemaker are like, goodbye. Just eliminate them before the tournament even begins. That would be so sick. It'd be unreal, right? Right, okay, and here's another detail that I didn't know, because there actually was no information about this online anywhere. But actually, it's not randomized as to where the winners of the wildcard match go. We know which group they go into. But I noticed the only place I could find that info was in the HLTV.org preview. It wasn't on the website. It wasn't on Liquipedia. So what happens is, the winner of the... I believe it's the winner of the FaZe Ty Lue one goes into Group A, which is the one that's SK, Virtus Pro, Gambit. And then the winner of the Team Liquid Vega Squadron 1 goes into Group B. Now, I have to say, first of all, I'm glad it's that way around, because Group B, if FaZe goes in there, would be so ridiculous. It'd be the most cancer best group of death of all time, wouldn't it? Well,
yeah, that would be
at
unreal.
least that way around's a little bit fairer, because I think of it this way, right? Group A is already a little bit suspect, because you have to realize, first of all, SK's got bolts, which we'll address in a second. Gambit, obviously, actually, they literally just lost a best of 3 at Alan recently to fucking Mouse Sports, the other week in a tournament no one watched. Virtus Pro's obviously in bad shape. So if you put FaZe in there, at least FaZe is an obvious favourite to come out. No one's really hard done by if, any of those 3 teams that don't get out. It's not the end of the world. That's reasonable. But Group B is already a group of death with the 3 they've got in there. So if you put FaZe in there, it's kind of bullshit, right? Whereas my logic is, Team Liquid, yet again, by the way, for every tournament it feels like now, drawn the super hard group of death. But in a way that's good, because at the moment everyone still wants Team Liquid to prove themselves. So if Team Liquid can get out of Group B, you can't even fuck with them at this point in time, can you? If you can get out of a group with Astralis North G2, which is all best of 3, that'd be too good, wouldn't it? I mean, I would go ahead and say they probably shouldn't, but it would be pretty nuts.
Yeah, but how much longer does Team Liquid have to prove themselves? How many best 3? How long
Moses,
does it have to go on
to
for?
other people.
They happen to be North American, Moses, so the answer is
I know,
forever.
fair play. I know, I get it. But like, let's be realistic here. They have they're 2-1 against SK in series. I think they've beat Astralis in 2 series now, or maybe 1-1, something along those lines. They've got top 4s. For me, fair play. You guys can anyone can call me biased on this one, but I would put Liquid into that camp that's proved themselves. So I mean, we have to start raising the bar of expectations for Team Liquid beyond just getting out of groups, right? It has to now start being, let's lock in some top 4s. Let's see a run to the finals where they can actually compete and not get blown out of the water by FaZe. I think that Group B for Liquid, it might be the group of death, but I think if we're going to call that a group of death, I think it's relatively weak considering I'm not sold on G2. You want to talk about a team that's been the most disappointing over the past couple months for me. It's definitely G2. I'm so sick of reading interviews with G2 players coming into events and them saying, yeah, we're introducing some more stuff. We've changed some things around, and we're just going to use this event to see how it goes. I'm so sick of reading those interviews of them, measuring expectations for themselves. When do we get to see? Oh, we've changed some things around and we won this event. We changed some things around and we bombed out of this event. Now we've got things zeroed in, and we're going to come into this event ready to win it. Moses, when do we get that G2?
That's the sick thing. I've referenced this before, but we've now got a conclusive answer. You remember, Semmler, because we were doing that couch at the for this event. It was when they won Malmo. If you remember, what happened was there was a turning point in the whole tournament where they were literally on the brink of elimination by SK in the quarterfinals. And then they miraculously won the series. It's the one where Apex was just going ham the whole time. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, if you remember, they then played NIP in the semi-finals. They beat them. They played North in the final. They beat them. They won a massive Tier 1 event, one of the biggest of the year, with all the teams gathered, And after the event, one of the ways that they'd won the event was they didn't do the classic LDLC, envious G2 force buys. They just kept doing what they would do legit is every time you would force buy, instead they would buy a CZ. One of them might buy just armor. Body armor. One would buy body armor and they'd have one flash. And first of all, they were getting tons of kills on these rounds. They were sometimes even winning them outright just without weapons, And then because they were saving, Kenny S all day long had AWPs in his hands. And he was the MVP of the whole tournament, arguably, unless you give it to Apex. One of the two, right? So he had an amazing... It's literally what if you were looking at the G2 team on paper, you'd say, this is how we should play, We've got amazing players, so we could already get away with kind of not doing full force buys anyway. And then we've got the best AWP in the world, so we want him to have an AWP in his hands at all times. And if you remember, traditionally, the weakness of that G2 team was, because they did force buys all the time, they always used to have a very streaky CT side. They never had strong holds. So suddenly that was there. And as a result, you could kind of be wow, this is it. We've seen all the potential of this team finally come to bear. Well, after the tournament, right, Yanko, there was some sort of an interview, and I remember it was Yanko, made a tweet where he made some comment about a force buy or something, and Smiths replied to it and literally said, without any sort of joke in his tone, what do you mean? No, we just didn't force buy because when we lost all the pistol rounds to SK, we knew we weren't going to have pistols for that event. And you're thinking wait a minute, what do you mean?
That can't be real.
That was real. And if you look at all the tournaments since then, Moses, they have fully force bought. So against Cloud9, against Cloud9 at the E-League Premier, they force bought all day long and ruined an entire map. So they literally don't understand that factor helped them win Malmo. They think that was just... In fact, they think the opposite, Moses. They think that was they were operating in a really tough situation. I bet in their minds... Are you ready? Are you going to go into their minds now, Sam? This is how fucked French CS is. In their minds, they were we even won an event without any weapon on the force buy. We had to just use CZ, in, out, pa. We go out again. The next thing, I'm hey, Kenny, you got to kill him with the op. You have no more guns. In their mind, it was harder for them to do real saves.
That's what you sound like, Semmler, when you speak French, by the way. That's what you sound like.
Isn't it?
I don't know what you're talking about, my friend.
Exactly. First of all, there's no way any of them talk like that. My thing is, my accent's straight fire for it's either Apex. I think it's mainly Apex. It's Apex. There's a little bit of shocks, some happy mixed in there,
I found that tweet, by the way, because that tilted me. It's replied. It's a response to not to. It's just after a 0-6 pistol BO3, you realize you're not that good at pistol this tournament. Sorry, it will come back.
Yeah.
Came back to right in the fucking dick, didn't it? That next event they just bombed out of. Fucking hell.
Yeah, because you have to realize the next events they had the E-League group, which they got out because they beat Na'Vi, but then they just played Cloud9 the round of 8. And here's the thing. This should have been the ultimate sign, Semmler. Because I want to get your take on this. You've known those guys in the scene a long time, how they think about the game. The reason why, to me, that should have been the ultimate wake-up call is because Cloud9 themselves at the moment are a team that doesn't have like a proper in-game leader. They have a lot of skill, but they obviously play a bit poggy themselves. When you lose a series to someone like them, that should almost show you that like it doesn't work doing the Super Force Spy style, you know? Like that it just gambles that you can lose to, in theory, a team that you should beat, you know? What do you think about this approach then? Because it sounds like they're never going to go back to that thing. That was a one-off. That was like for a moment we got to dream that that's what G2 would play, but they'll never play that again unless, you know, they recruit existence or something.
Well, yeah, that's never going to happen, sadly. Although you kind of do wish it would. Well, we already figured out the reason why they lose. Well, no, actually, it's already screwed up because Pro League, I wasn't at Pro League and they still lost. So, I mean, never mind. Because we joke, like Shocks and I joking about it. We're talking about it where it's just like, actually, Semmler, if you are here and you are casting our games, we just lose. I was like, oh, this is your week, boys. You're going to Epicenter. I'm not there. Let's see you take home that trophy, right? But in reality, I think it comes down to what Moses was talking about, is the fact that the team is constantly saying that they aren't ready or that they haven't figured out a solution. And to me, a team that actually knows how to eco is a team that trusts in a system, in a structure. And so they know that, hey, we can get slapped around these 2 rounds because we have something in our back pocket that we're going to whip out when we have the Kevlar, when the pistols, when we have the Kevlar, the rifles, the nades, everything we need. We've practiced this. We know it works, right? You know, there's like a structure that you can fall back on. It gives you confidence. And if you start winning those rounds too, you get more confidence and more belief in the structure. And that's how you can play these ballsy, just flat eco rounds, because you know we have something that's coming up next that's going to get us control back in this map, and that's how it progresses. G2 clearly don't have that themselves. If they're saying it in interviews where it's just like, we still have no idea actually what makes this machine work, and we don't know how to get everybody believing in the system, we don't know how to get everybody on the same page, despite the fact that they still have all of this support structure around them. One of the best support structures as far as I'm concerned, knowing the people involved, NKJ as analyst, Smiths, who has a long history with these players as the coach, and then Jerome as a manager. Those players don't have to worry about shit all apart from how do we just be happy and play CS well. And they still haven't figured out how to fucking do that. And so without being able to do that, yeah, they're going to go for the high variance, risky kind of style because they're just throwing Hail Marys all the time, aren't they? Playing hard ecos means that you have a structure that you're confident in and that you've worked out. Playing Force Spies all the time is you just saying, we've got fucking great aimers who on their good day might be able to just win us this map, hands down, right? Like we see with Apex and Kenny going off. There you go. When one of those guys goes batshit, that's when G2 win.
That's what I can't handle, though, is like, here's the thing. I've always said about that sort of force spying, right? First of all, I'm definitely not someone who's against all concepts of force spying. There's times in a game where you have to do it. Like,
sure,
it logically makes sense. Or, you know, like, for example, sometimes it doesn't make sense to save if then you would have to win like 7 straight rounds with no losses, whereas you can sort of gamble one now, because then if you look mathematically on how many you win, because they'd have to eco 2 later on, you know, you suddenly only have to win half the rounds. That mathematically actually makes sense then to do a force spy. The problem with G2, and this crosses back into when they used to be in Happy's team in Envious, is they took that logic and were like, well, in that case, we should just force buy every single time, no matter what. Like, I've always made the joke, there's never a time they save. Like, they've never met a force buy they didn't like. Somehow, every single one they meet, they're like, yeah, let's do it.
I mean, all right, Moses, you go ahead, but there's a couple of things that I picked up on as well that I want to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's just brief. It's just, you know, at Malmo they accidentally stumbled upon this winning formula that actually caused them to win the whole event, and the fact that they've gone away from it afterwards is just so disappointing. And I think someone made a great point as well. The idea that, you know, if you are a team that, you know, believes in the eco rounds, you have something to go behind. I'm just more like, you know, discouraged by their lack of confidence in themselves, and I'm just so sick of hearing that. Like, I like that team, I like the players, and I think they're all good. I'm just so sick of the rhetoric of saying this is an event we're using to gauge some of the changes and new things we want to work into our play style. And it's just like, what event are you preparing for? Like, at what point do you like just say, we're ready to compete at a high level? Because we've been waiting for this team since it formed, and it's just nothing has come to pass yet.
Okay, so Semmler, as someone who knows all the people involved, as you were just laying out, like the infrastructure there, and have talked to these players at events, you know, to find through the ups and the downs. Give me some insight, because I have to say, one of the bizarre things about this is, like, as Moses is referencing here, they're not a team who ever just come out and say, you know, oh, we just played badly, but, you know, we did everything right. They actually always do have this running storyline where it's like, you know, we have to practice properly and we got to go back home and think. But the part about that I don't really get is, like, a great example would be Carrigan, right? Every team he ever gets, from the first event they're running, you know, that things are working, he's getting things how he wants it. Yeah, it might not be at 100% yet, but he's got a concept in mind, he's working on things, he's got maps that he can play. Why do they still have, you know, like 6 months odd after they made the line, why do they still have all these excuses in G2?
Because I think that it's ever changing with G2. Like, you have very emotional players on that team, and that's not saying that you don't have emotional players elsewhere, but it's like you watch G2 play right now, and this is what I was noticing at E-League when they were competing there was you're seeing the player cams, you're seeing the player reactions, and when a team relies so goddamn heavily on Kenny S to get shit done and Apex to get things done, if you're seeing like round wins and Kenny is barely cracking a smile when a year ago he would have been shouting his head off, or even, you know, you go back, Kenny gets hype, right? And what I've noticed over the past couple of tournaments is that I'm not seeing, and this isn't from talking, this is just from having watched these guys play for so long now and seen their reactions and how they react, etc. It makes you wonder, like, are we having another Kiyoshima situation where it's not something that's in server, like people are doing their jobs in the server, but is it something that's outside of the server that's harder to resolve? Is it interpersonal relationships in the team? Is it something going on with the mood of the team? Like, what's going on? Because French players, this is also historically an issue with French teams, is that they tend to have difficulty talking or like figuring out working solutions together. What's always been the solution, it seems, in the past is just, oh, this isn't working. Okay, we've reached a critical point. Okay, self-destruct the team and start over again, right? And then that honeymoon period is what you ride out and win your championships on. And then once, again, things start falling apart, you just self-destruct and, oh, this is the new super team, right? And so I'm wondering what's going on with G2 right now, if these guys feel like they're backed into a corner and they can't self-destruct anymore because they are supposed to be the cream of the crop, the very top of the French scene, and so there's nobody else to pull in. Or
they've also came out,
are they feeling like that? Or
said,
go ahead.
We're not making changes. We're going to ride through this together, and we're going to figure it out. You know, that's things they've talked about. They want to break that chain of the French explosion and honeymoon period.
Yeah, well, that's, and I think that's where we're getting a lot of these problems from then, because we're not even talking about CS here. We're talking about how the hell do you guys interact as adults and professionals on a roster without just resolving to not even stabbing each other in the back and going for roster changes, just blowing up rosters. So it's not even a game of CS at this point. It's a game of like, how do these guys actually progress towards the same goal together as a unit and actually see it that way instead of self-destructing.
Here's a detail that might actually shock you as well.
Hit me.
You know, it was actually Body who came out recently, and the headline for the interview was, you know, this isn't the French super team, or something along those lines, you know.
Sure.
Which, by the way, does play into the psychology of this team. Like, they have always tried to deny that label and make, no, we're just another team, you know. I actually just looked it up now, because I was looking at the stats of the players, and Body, okay, when they first put this lineup together, was actually having really good stats for all the tournaments, right? He was like really high fragging, like 0.7 FPR. In the last 6 tournaments, he has had, for 5 of them, he had 0.54 type kills per round, so really low. And even at E-League Premier, it's 0.61. So his stats for the last 6 tournaments are off a cliff. Like, they're just terrible. Like, those are the sort of stats you'd expect from a player like Dossier in Gambit, for example. Like, not very high fragging, you know, just sort of do a little bit of your job and hope other people have all the firepower, you know. If you actually look at the Envy at G2, this is one of the reasons why I get so confused by the 4-spy approach, is, like I said, it's not working. You know, it's one thing if you make it work sort of half the time, then I can maybe argue, like, well, maybe on this part of it doesn't work almost ever for them, actually. Like, they basically, their firepower is Kenny S, basically, and they don't put ops into his hands.
So Body is our canary in the coal mine here.
Well, here's the thing. Shox also has terrible stats, but he gets away with the fact that I am the in-game leader, etc. You know, I win clutch rounds. You know, he has some things going for him, but it doesn't look good if a player who's the young guy who hasn't had it. You remember, Body's the only player who wasn't involved in any of those past envious teams and, all the teams that had those issues and the motivation issues. He's the fresh guy on the scene who's so far been having a great career, right? And looks like he's got his issues.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always going to be issues, and the first you really notice it, or the first people you always point at are the guys like Body, who aren't the stars, like rely on the stars' success to find spaces for them to make their own. I think Body is still a good player, despite maybe looking at those stats. I still like what he brings to the table, and I think the French teams especially needed someone like him. He is kind of that. He is like the new kind of Kiyoshima, who does kind of fill in the gaps and do some of the dirty work. And I guess that player you'd label as more supportive or more passive, but I think we nailed. I mean, I think we've touched on it a number of times, obviously, with this team, but it is partially Kenny has to be very, very good in these games, and because of their force buying, he doesn't always have an off. And then on top of that, the next person you go to if Shox is going to be the in-game leader and consistently be at this level is Apex, who over the history of his career, through no fault of his own, it's just what happens as a pure entry fragger. You are going to be inconsistent in terms of the impact and in terms of your production, just because of the nature of that role. And he's probably the only player I can really think of that is that ingrained in that like 100% entry fragger position. And it's just never going to be a consistent thing. So yeah, this team, to me, I know they've had their ups and downs and they've looked good at times, have won a couple events. It's still very much a question mark. I'm just so tired of seeing their lack of confidence in themselves. I want this team to just have some fucking balls and maybe go on a cliff. And maybe if they tell people by the end of the year we're going to be winning events again, maybe if you set that goal as a squad, you get there. But they can't go into every event telling people, we've been changing something and we want to see how it goes.
Plus, think of it this way, right? First of all, I don't like this as a general metric for how you do in the game because it's totally irrelevant. Like, people don't actually, for any fans listening, nobody in CSGO plays well or badly based on if they get paid a lot or a little. That actually has no relevance to how good players play, because good players are motivated to be good. They don't literally sit down and go, right, what's my pay packet? Right, I'll play a lot today. So I will just point out, when G2 say that, no, we're not the super team, yeah, we've got a lot to figure out. You are one of the highest paid teams of all time in Counter-Strike. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, you have every single resource you could need. Secondly, you've already won 2 events this year, 2 big events. With this lineup, there are no excuses anymore. This is just who you are as a team, There's no magic solution coming out 9 months into the lineup that's going to change everything. So I have to ask this, Semmler. It might sound like a weird question to ask, but first of all, in the context of what we started out discussing this, it's possible G2 isn't getting out of this group. So they'll have had a whole bunch of bad results since Malmo. Got knocked out early at E-League because people expected they'd beat Cloud9. Obviously haven't even gotten to some of the lands like ESL New York because they got upset in the bracket. Now in this group, they would go out in the group stage, right? I think at this point in time, you actually do have to start, not necessarily immediately, but thinking about when's there going to be a roster move. Because I have to say, Semmler, looking at these teams where Shox becomes the in-game leader, it works fucking dynamite the first 3 months. He figures out what he wants to do. He calls a loose style. Sometimes, obviously in the past, sometimes he'll play well himself, as he did in Envious, as he did in this team. But it's not a long-term solution, is it? Like, you can see, that's one of the telltale signs right there, is whenever people start talking as if there is no solution and they're just praying it comes. Because I'll give you an example, okay? North is a team that's been tortured all year long. They've had so many upsets against them. They've had so many events where they were underwhelming. But you never hear their players like, oh, we don't really know what we're doing tactically, and, we're going to have to figure it out. They know they've got an in-game leader. They have a plan. It's just not working, There's a difference between the two, right?
I mean, they're every time I've had a chance to talk to the players on North, they've always said, it's like we may have different ways of approaching the round, but MSL's word is law and we just follow along. And then it's after the game that there's a discussion, right? So I've always admired that professionalism in those players. At least that's what they tell me, right? But those players, it's like, okay, that's professional, that's interesting, and that's how you maintain a unit, is that, it's like, okay, there is no bullshit during the game. Whatever gets called, maybe a little bit of discussion, but if MSL says something, well, okay, that's it. He's the in-game leader and you do it. And then if you think that strategy needs to change, you address that afterwards. What I'm wondering about is how does that pan out if you're Shoxy? And, well,
here's the shocking question. Are you ready, Semmler? This is one that no one's thought of, okay? So if you have to make a roster move, right? Because, first of all, they clearly have leadership issues. Secondly, as I've said, if you actually look statistically, they're not even fragging very well. Like, if team who force buys all the time, you want them to have mad fraggers, right? Historically, yeah, they've got great names in the team. They don't play like it, though. So here's the problem. You start looking at who they might have to replace. Shox is actually a pretty bad fragger at the moment. He's not a star player.
Yeah, Shoxy never gets replaced, though. So that's Shoxy and NBK are like the kingmakers at this point.
I mean, I don't even necessarily like this train of question just because I don't want to talk about G2 making a roster change. But I guess if we're going to go down this road, the first thing I'd say is you change the in-game leader. You put Shox. You take that burden away from him and see how this team does without him calling. I think that'd be the first step you try before any roster change comes in. And I don't know if that'll happen necessarily. He seems to be pretty happy in that role, like he wants to do it. But I think that's the first step you have to take before you start cutting players.
Have we thought about? I mean, it is.
Okay, Kenny S.
No. It's like what I wonder is this a case of burnout? Is this a case of you're right, Duncan? These guys are getting paid fucking shitloads of money in their terms, right? Way more money than they would have ever made doing anything else. You know, so what I want, I mean, this is just like on the flip side, right? These guys are making so much skrill that they, you know, it's just like, okay, you will have the guys who stay motivated. And then do you have the guys who get burnt out and don't necessarily or aren't necessarily as motivated? And that's what I wonder if that's what's going on here with G2 is, do we have guys who are on one page and those who are on others? And is that a conflict? Because to me, it's not about like what's necessarily going on in CS. If it's in CS, like I was saying earlier, right? When you see Kenny shrugging all the time, when you see Apex doing, you know, the meme and all that sort of stuff, you know, I mean, it's like, is it something because they on paper and what we see when the game actually works, they can out-frag anybody pretty much. They have so much firepower on the team when it comes to CS. You don't even need to call a strat. You just have Apex. Apex goes and kills 2 people, or Kenny goes and kills 3 people, and it's like you don't need strats for that. You can just literally let those guys go beast. So that kind of points in a direction of it can't be something that's going on in CS. It's got to be something that's going on in the team, in relationships in the team, motivation, something along those lines. And that's what I wonder is that what's going to be what tanks G2? And is that what's going to cause a roster change?
Well, that's why I referenced this detail of the stats, because here's the thing. If you do a force buy style like they do, you're going to have games where people just don't get any kills and you lose very early, because basically the periods at which you force bought just, you know, snowballed the whole game against you score-wise. You know, you're down 11-2 and then you force buy, now you're down 13-2. You know, you're going to have games where people's stats are shit. But they actually statistically, if you look at their team, right, Kenny has superstar numbers every tournament. It doesn't matter. Every event he has great numbers. Basically, all the rest of them have their issues. Like MBK's had a little bit of a rise. Apex is obviously up and down. That's just his style. The others, though, every event, it's pretty low. So actually, you look over all the months, it's not high numbers. And then you look at the fact that, as I said, they joined at the beginning of February, the other players. So they've now had this lineup more than 8 months. They've played, I think, 10 LANs. So at this point in time, if you look just historically at teams, you don't really turn the corner. You don't change nothing drastically changes 10 LANs in and, you know, 8 months into a team. That's actually normally the life cycle of a team. So I don't know what they think's going to change, because at the moment, if I have to just say to myself, this is who G2 is, right? Then what I would say is this would be the reasonable way to think of them as a team, right? Every maybe 4 events, they'll have a really good event where they get a hot streak, they win some maps, they win a big series, they have a chance to win, but the rest of them just go ahead and underrate them. Just say they're not going to do well, probably won't get out this group. That would be the form guide. You know, if I had to tell someone like to bet, you know, I would say that. I'd say like for example, here's a great example. Let's tie it back in. In this group here, I would tell everyone, don't pick G2, which doesn't mean they can't do it. Maybe they'll do great, but there's no reason that they'd do great, put it that way. So I'd just go ahead and say Astralis, North, potentially Team Liquid. These are all teams right now that play consistently better than G2, that have a logic to them, that have players who will all perform at similar levels. So right now, like, does anyone in this call actually believe in G2?
No.
Right. So we had to lose Moses, sadly. I won't even make a joke about that. Who gives a fuck, right? Let's keep going. So here's what I would ask you then, Semmler. So the other teams in Group B, let's finish up Group B and then we'll go to Group A. So the rest of the teams in Group B is perhaps Team Liquid, and then we got Astralis and we got North. So another reason why I feel like this is a bad group for G2, just to go into those other teams, is all the teams they're going to play in Group B potentially are all tactical teams. Like Team Liquid's actually shown that they're going with a tactical approach and they've got a pretty solid style. North actually have so far played, they were the team that took FaZe the closest. They played a pretty legit game. If you ever saw that game, by the way, that's one where the stats are really misleading, because the stats say, G2, it was double digits, but G2 just won comfortably. They didn't. What happened was G2 won all the pistols basically, and then North won tons of gun rounds. So that was actually a legit close game. And then Astralis had a very, pretty good map against FaZe, and in general, it seemed like they are gradually getting back there, not at peak form, obviously, but they're pretty good again. What do you think of Astralis and North at the moment?
To me, it's just Astralis. It is that grind kind of mentality, I think, for them, where it's all about just trying to maintain that edge when you have been at the top, and now you're just barely below the top. You still got it, but what is it that's lacking, that's keeping you from not just closing out these best of threes the way you used to do in the past, right? So I think for Astralis, it's all just a game of small adjustments that they're playing with themselves. I do worry just a little bit about the mental coach aspect of things, that becomes too much of a crutch. And the way that I see that is that you to be like a champion, to just have that trophy hoisting run, you need to just be 100% convinced without any doubt in your mind that you are the best on that server, right? That's how Fnatic did it. That's how FaZe are doing it right now. It's just like these guys, they just know when they get on that server that they're going to shit on everybody. And what I worry about is teams like NiP, Astralis, even North right now are using a mental coach, is that they get too deep into the mental coach aspect of things, where they start doubting themselves unnecessarily, where in the past perhaps they would have just been like, right, okay, keep moving. Now they're like, oh no, I got to talk to the mental coach. And so I want to be able, I want to have a sit down with some of them and just be like, how much do you guys use that mental coach? Because I feel like that's a bit of an interesting side to things. When it comes to Astralis, I think it's just tweaking small things to get them back up onto it, right? Because Device is still maintaining a solid level on his side of things. Dupree has his solid games, right? Zipmix is like a rock. You can just count on him forever. So, it's just the smallest factors that are making them lose these games. So for Astralis, I'm not too worried about it. I feel like they're going to get there, right? With North... With North, it's a little bit tougher. I got to meet Velda, which is cool, and I hadn't really met and talked with him before, right? But at E-League, we were able to catch up a little bit, or at least get to know each other a little bit, and that was cool. He seems like he's got a real solid head on his shoulders, and he's hungry as fuck all. He's super hungry to get in there. And I think that's where it's I'm not going to worry about North either, because these guys are still so hungry to be number one in Denmark, and then obviously number one in the world, right? They want to crush Astralis and take that throne away from them, and as far as Denmark is concerned, and then continue the campaign on. So with North, it's really just, you have to... MSL needs to believe in his structure more than ever, if that makes sense. It's they're on the right path, and after talking with the players, they are confident in the structure and how it works. It feels like now that they have Velda in there, all the roles are kind of back into it. Everybody feels like they've got their roles now, that the roles that they want, and you've got that heavy fragger in Velda that you can count on. And so I think North is just a little bit of time, because they've got the hunger, they've got the motivation, they have all the support from their organization. So to me, that's just that's a winning combination that eventually, when they have everything, that they are going to get there.
Yeah, the thing is, with Astralis, I don't have too much to say on that one, because I do feel while their form looks like it's going back up again, I do still think there's some sort of a problem in that team. Because I remember, right, when we were at ESL 1 New York, there was a stat that they put on the screen at some point in the group stage when Astralis was playing. And the stat was crazy. It said something along the lines of, whenever Astralis held opponents to something like 5 or less CT rounds, they won 90% of the time. So basically, in all their past success, they were getting these amazing T-sides off. That's what made them so good. You think of Astralis' style, that's why they had the deep map pool. They could get that style off on every map. And actually, if you looked at the E-League Premier, even though they finished second place, they had a lot of games where it was really tough on their T-side. In the final, obviously, they had non-existent T-side, because FaZe has shown us these ridiculous CT sides.
Yeah.
But even in the other matches, even against Cloud9, even at times against Fnatic, they weren't having like insane T-halves. So I do still feel like there's something missing a little bit. And that's why actually the player who looks like he's struggled the most recently is Kirby. And he obviously is the entry man. And I have to say, that's the part where everyone's a little bit worried. But then you go over to North, and this is why it's really intriguing, because normally you can't have a discussion about Astralis without mentioning North, because you think to yourself, right, if there's a problem in Astralis, who are we taking from North? Who are we going to recruit here? Who are we going to change? But at the moment, I have to say, if I was North, you get paid more than Astralis. You're actually just as good a team. If I was the North players, I realise this is easy to say rather than do, but I actually would say to them, I wouldn't leave. I'd stay. Because right now you actually might end up being the better team. And if anything, in the future, you might be able to go the other way. You might be able to get Device into your team, if you want it in the future. So you look at North right now, I agree with you, mate. I actually think at the moment, all the signs I've seen from them in the first tournaments they've played with this lineup look like it's actually building and building and building. They look like they're getting better and better and better. And at the moment, what you have to wait for when that happens is you just got to see where's it going to peak. Like if it just peaks here, yeah, it'll be a little bit underwhelming. It'll be like, yeah, it could be a top 4 team, something like that. But at the moment, they're looking solid enough where you still can't be sure, but they might be a team that can win tournaments. They might be getting a tournament. They might win Epicenter. They might do what they did last year in Dignitas. You look at the side, they look pretty solid, especially because I've noticed the thing about MSL, okay, as a leader, the reason why it's easy to make fun of him sometimes is he's a very stubborn leader. Like he wants to play this specific map, and it doesn't matter that, he's picking Mirage into FaZe, and Mirage is arguably FaZe's best map, and the team they're probably the best in the world on. He does it, but, he still gets a lot of rounds on it. So the reason why I actually respect him is it's a very hard approach to take, but his approach that he takes is basically excellence. He's like, right, these are the maps we're going to be good on. And if we win, it will be because we win on these maps. We're going to pick these maps. We're going to play these maps. You can prepare for us on these maps, but we're going to be playing these maps. And if we win, it will be because we execute and because players do their job. And so while that can be a very hard style to make work because people have advanced knowledge of what you're going to do, sometimes if it's like FaZe, they might have a better team. Yeah, you got to give him credit. He does make it work to a degree. So if he can win doing that, a lot of the credit will go to him, I think.
He's chosen to play the game on hard mode. Because, to me, it's like Kerrigan has got like the easy mode way and G2 are trying to get that easy mode way where it's just like you have just explosive, really hard to predict rounds where somebody goes apeshit, a la Guardian or Olaf or Nico or whatever, right? Where they just take over a map and that's just what they do, like Kenny and Apex can do, right? Like that to me is playing the game on easy mode, especially today with how many analysts are in play and how quickly they are managing to just collect data on your team. So every time you try and come up with a strategy, every time you try and execute something new, that within an hour, every other top tier team has an analyst who's looking through that with a fine-tooth comb, figuring out exactly how to counter it, right? And so that's the game within a game right now with all these in-game leaders is how do I come up with something new that fits my team, that everybody can believe in and that will work? And it's like, I have to hold on to that for like the perfect moment to use it, because if I use it early, that's it, game's up, and they're going to figure out how to counter it within an hour. So, so it's like MSL has chosen to just do this without, like, he's trying to run a dungeon right now, ass naked. And you got the FaZe Dragon that's right around the corner waiting for him. Like, it's going to be real fun to see if he can actually pull it off, because you're right. Then it's like all respect to MSL and the rest of them, all respect to North, because they did it really hard. They didn't just be like, we're going to put 4 god tier aimers in a map and then let them run ham.
Karrigan and MSL basically are the polar opposite in-game leaders, because the first thing Karrigan does when he joins a team is like, right, we're not going to just specialize on one map. We're just going to try and get a really wide map pool initially so I can fuck with people and pick ban. Tactics, yeah, we'll have a couple, but initially, we'll play off the star players. If a tactic breaks, just, free player, do what you want. Whereas MSL, like I say, he really is the guy, like, right, first thing we're going to do is get good at this map. So classically, maybe Cobblestone or something, We're going to get that really good so that we can always beat teams on that. Right now, we're going to gradually expand out. So they're both different, interesting approaches, because they both basically are going to the same place, just from the opposite ends, One starts really wide and tries to narrow in to become very good. The other one starts very small and then widens out, And obviously, how far you get isn't just on the in-game leader. It depends what your team you have and what talent you have to work with.
I think that's key for Kerrigan.
Yeah. So the difference is, Karrigan obviously is in the ultimate position to start with a wide spotlight. He has such mad fraggers, he can win on maps that potentially, like you saw with Cash, that maybe isn't even a map they play. But the difference is, I actually feel like this is the first time that MSL has the actual tools where perhaps he can do this approach and be number one.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's actually a pretty good approach if you're an underdog team. If you can get amazing on one map, you absolutely can upset top teams on it, even if they're better than you. And here's the thing, it'll take them a while to figure it out. They'll keep playing, you think, well, I'm better than this team and this is a good map for me, so why wouldn't I let them play it? And then you'll figure out that's their specialist map. They're going ham on it. That's what they've done throughout their history, you know. Whether it was Cobblestone way back in the Kirby days, last year with Dignitas, it was Overpass, you know, they could always get wins on people on that. So okay, let's talk a bit about Group A then. Because Group A is the one where some of these teams, like for example, I'll just go ahead and say right now, we're not going to talk about Virtus.pro. It's a waste of time. No one knows what they're going to look like with the new in-game leader. We haven't seen them play a LAN. And obviously they're in a group where even with these teams, at the moment you can't favour them to get out. So we'll skip them. What I want to ask you about is this. What do you think of SK bringing bolts to this tournament? Because there's a weird scenario with that. There's a caveat, right? Which is that apparently they can't use them for the major. So apparently for the major, the implication is they're going to bring Phelps back just for that one tournament. And they're going to use bolts now. And he's on loan when I'm doing air quotes when I say that. But the implication is they're just going to sign him. And it's just because he hasn't signed yet. So what do you think of an SK Gaming that has bolts in? Do you think it's a good move?
I think that's actually, I mean, to me, SK, that the whole Phelps move was a real tough one for them because basically you're talking about it's the same old tired subject, right? Of how do you get not even Fallen, but Fallen does play a role in this, but like Fur and Phelps, two ultra aggressive kinds of players who really just want to take over map space. How do you get them to coexist? What was fun is that I don't think that anybody realized going into it just how badly Fallen's game would be impacted by that as well. Yeah. And we saw Fallen just drop off a cliff when Phelps joined up because all of a sudden he had to figure this out.
That makes a lot of sense though, you know, because just like a quick note, if you ever looked how the old SK used to operate, right? Yeah. Okay, so we were all looking at Fallen because we were like, wow, he's the in-game leader and he does all these crazy peaks on like CT side, for example, and gets the kills. But part of why that used to work is if you ever go and look, he actually played a lot of sites that like FNX was in, and FNX's style was like super passive because he was like just using like, you know, experience and veteran savvy. And so in a way, Fallen could do that because he knew if like it went wrong or he had to fall back, he had a guy sort of like covering those areas. Whereas obviously Phelps comes from being the star player of Immortals, you know, he was the guy who did whatever he wanted.
Yeah. And it feels like they really didn't manage to make it work. And then obviously people are going to start feeling frustrated with that. And Phelps seems like a very quiet kind of guy. Just noticing things right when you're at the restaurant, the hotel restaurant, for example, you'll see the other guys, but you never see Phelps, you know. And some players, you know, it's like they're just very passive and private like that. But you know, with like the rest of the team, you're like you're all here, but there's no Phelps. So it's always something you kind of notice. And you're like, okay, whatever. But when it comes to the firepower on SK and how the system can work, I think bolts should be theoretically this should be a really super solid team now because you're going to have Cold, you're going to have Fallen, and you're going to have Fur who can all play to their strengths, and then you have Taco and Bolts to back them up depending on where you need a little bit more support based off of like, okay, Fur wants to push mid on Mirage, okay, Bolts, you're going to help him out here, right? You can kind of craft your game around there, whereas before it was just, it feels like it was always a struggle between, okay, who's going to help who and how do we facilitate that, right? So now it could be just you have three really solid players who are just going to get the frags and make the plays, and you know, Taco, Bolts, both capable players in their own right. You're just not going to look to them to do that the way that you look to Phelps to do that for SK before. Now you really can just kind of have those two guys who are there propping up that structure and allowing for the other three to excel.
I think the player this actually puts the pressure on, aside from Bolts, obviously, he was literally got to really prove himself.
Sure.
It's actually Fur, because here's the thing. I felt like the upside of having Phelps before was like you had these three really strong individual players, and so you could kind of do it by committee. You know, like Cold Zero does it all the time, but in theory, if Phelps had an off game, Fur was there all the time. If Fur wasn't as good, Phelps could. Well, now, if you bring in Bolts, you're not expecting Bolts to have loads of frags. He's just going to be very solid and help the team play aspect. So now it means that someone like Fur, who's been up and down, because he plays a very risky style of play, he's really got to do a lot of work. Because I feel like it just puts like a lot of the win conditions on him being very good as well as Cold Zero.
I mean, it could definitely backfire, but the way that I see it playing out in my mind is like a sigh of relief from Fur, where Fur can just be like, okay, now it's my game, right? Now I get to be the one who just like, there's no second guessing myself. There's no thinking, oh, but Phelps or whatever, like, does this work for the team or any of this shit? No, now Fur can just be like, right, my game, my call. Fallen's going to play around me. Cold is just going to be the Terminator sitting in a corner getting 4 frags. I get to just decide where I want to go and what I want to do. And I could, without having to second guess or doubt or anything like that. I think that's how it could play out, where you actually just have the resurgence of Fur as this beast, because there's no doubt left. There's no, trying to keep somebody else happy the way even Fur had to do with FNX back in the day, It could be interesting here, because I think Bolts is just grateful. He's just going to be this super, he should just be this super positive force on the team, where he just comes in and he should be grateful to be there, right? Where he's just going to be happy to be back playing with these guys, with some of them, right? And he's just looking to show a good game. So it's perfect. You got a guy with a great mentality coming into the roster, and this should maybe alleviate some tension that was there before. If things weren't working out with Phelps, that's going to put tension on the team. That's going to get things a little awkward, perhaps. And so, now you have Phelps, who's not in the room anymore. Maybe the others are breathing a bit of a sigh of relief as well. Like, okay, cool, let's get back into it. And then you got Bolts, this positive force. This could be a really interesting SK, right? Going into it, if you still had Phelps, if it was still like the same SK, you'd probably be thinking like, okay, like this group, they kind of got lucky. They got Gambit, they got, they got Virtus Pro. Like, they should be doing pretty well. But now it's really like this will be a fight between, if things go according to plan, this should be a fight between FaZe and SK, right, for that first seed.
Yeah. So that's the question, okay? So obviously, even though FaZe has to play Tyler in the wildcard match, right, already it would be a fair assumption to assume they'd win, but when you consider they are undefeated in the last 2 LANs, I think it's reasonable to just skip that and say they'll make it in the group, right? So if they make it into the group, here's the thing. I'm actually a bit bummed that they're necessarily going to go into this group, because even though it makes the tournament seeding better, if they had have gone into the group of death, here's the upside, right? The whole undefeated thing, I don't think you get out of Group B undefeated. Like, look at the teams you have to play in best of threes. You have to play North and probably Astralis. The odds are you're finally going to get a loss and you're going to come back down to earth and we're going to see what the flaws are, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm waiting for with FaZe.
Do you think that this is the tournament where that happens?
Yeah, I do. I think you can only go, what is it, like they're 15-0 or something right now? I mean, you can only go so long before you got to slip somewhere. And that invincibility, I mean, you're right. I mean, like, okay, we might not see that in the groups, barring something special from SK. I think that SK have definitely got the firepower to put FaZe on their back feet and get them pressured, right, and take a map off of them. That, like, especially with how I've described SK and how I think it could work in my mind, that SK there could definitely take the fight to FaZe and really put some pressure on FaZe, because you got to remember, you still have the 4 core of SK major champions. These guys are beast. They definitely know that they're capable.
Plus, remember,
of being
they
the top.
take Fox and go. They almost went to the final of the major. Remember when Phelps initially joined? Yeah, they did badly those second and third tournaments, but the first one was the Vegas one. They made it to the final of that tournament. So you figure they are a team that probably can just slot someone in, and start making it work. They're not going to have the mentality of like, they're not going to do a G2. They're not going to be like, we have to work on it and practice.
None of that shit.
Going, yeah.
Fallen knows what's up, man. He'll have an idea. I think the entire thing has just been him trying to figure out how to balance his game, first game, Phelps' game, how to keep them happy. Now that that's gone, this could be a real murderous SK that we're looking at, and that could definitely put pressure on FaZe. But then you're right. I mean, you're looking at the other side of things. I mean, FaZe, North, or Astralis, North, right? They've been getting closer, and they're getting good. Their game is getting better. From North, for the reasons we talked about earlier, but Astralis, they're always a threat. They can always take a map off you. So to me, this is the tournament where we see FaZe's mettle, where we really see, like, right, you have lost a map. That invincible confidence might be wobbled just a little bit here. And now we get to see, right, does a team of superstars like this, does it work? Or do we start seeing some frustration? Do we start seeing, a little bit of discontentment in the machine here? I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see that, because that'll be the true test.
That's also why I think this is the perfect time for this event, because as I opened with, the top 7 teams, including FaZe, are here. Yeah. So in theory, you've got a format that is harder to win than all the others, because best of threes all the way through, even in the group stage. Yeah. Then, because it's best of threes in the other group, it's also less likely you get someone who wins the 2 best of ones. So for example, G2 doesn't just streakily win 2 best of ones. If they can win 2 best of threes and get out, they're probably in good form. So even if it's easy in the group stage, it's almost certain that whoever you play in the semis and the finals should be very, very good. Should in theory be the best teams at the event. So I would put it this way. If FaZe can just, again, first of all, if they can win the tournament, yeah, we have to start saying it's like the FaZe era. I mean, it'll just be so ridiculous at this point in time. But I would agree. I don't think they're going undefeated winning the event. And if they do, by the way, at that point in time, we're talking like momentous levels of shit. I mean, if you can go 3 events without losing a map, and these are 3 tough events as well. Yeah. That now we're getting ridiculous, because you're not supposed to even hit those sorts of like highs historically until further into like a lifespan of a team. You're not supposed to just come out the gate. Because I realized they had the Malmo event that was bad initially, but everything since then has been perfect, pretty much.
they've been riding it on. But I mean, that's what G2 or like every team is looking at this team with envy right now, just saying, yeah, that's how it goes, or it should be. You know, the honeymoon period. That's like the ideal situation. You just ride that cloud as long as you can, and then when things hit the fan. Coming back to SK real quick. I mean, it's going to sound like I'm really bigging up Bolts, but like another factor that I think plays into this and just why Bolts could be a perfect fit for this team is because now it's not like you're bringing up, a body or a devil or somebody who doesn't have any experience, but will have the right mindset perhaps, but doesn't have any experience. Bolts is experienced as fuck now. He's been around the block. He's been in a major final. He knows what's up. You're not going to have any kind of drop in performance from him. And he'll have definitely done his homework on SK. He's going to know how these guys function, how these guys play. They've been playing together for ages, against each other and against each other, and together for ages. So, I mean, dude, this Bolts on SK, the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, woo, this could be good. This could be really interesting. Now it's probably the rest of them who have to be a little worried here.
Like, the only way I could see it going badly, basically, is not in-game related. Because in-game, I think he's going to be fine. I actually think if you look at the job they want to do, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I remember I even said this. When they got Phelps, I remember thinking, well, if you really wanted to replace FNX, like, role-wise, you probably should have taken either Bolts or Lucas. They're the players, in theory, who play more like that in Immortals. It's just that, logically, I mean, Bolts... At the time, they're still thinking if you're in SK, well, that's the guy we kicked who actually was like just average when he was in our team, because he got a lot better when he joined Immortals. And then the Lucas 1 situation, you obviously can't get him because he wants to play with his brother permanently. So I understood why they made the Phelps gamble. Obviously also the upside was what you saw in the summer. If it had worked, you have these ridiculous core of players who are really, really skilled. So you could also win a lot of tournaments. So the only way I could see this not working is actually on the mentality of Bolts. Like, I just hope that it doesn't somehow rattle him, the fact that he has to play in this team he used to be in that basically kicked him out. And obviously when he was in this team in the past, he actually wasn't as good a player. You just hope that he can sort of maintain his mentality coming in, and that you hope that he comes in with the mentality of like, right now I'm going to prove everyone wrong and I'm going to show I was good enough. You don't want him to be like overthinking it, like, oh shit, this is my chance, I've got to do amazing here, it's going to go badly, because he obviously is in a tough situation, because he definitely doesn't want to go back to Immortals, because look at the fucking, it's a dumpster fire, right? It's a bad situation. It's unreal.
And you know what? I mean, you got to feel bad for Steel, man. Like, we got to mention him at least once, but what a kick in the nuts. You just got completely wrecked in the span of a couple months. And now the other guy who would have maybe been there to, have a drink with you, right? Both sitting at the bar, like, oh man, his life is hard.
No, that was the thing. They don't go to the bar, Semmler. You mean he's in the hotel room having some of the coffee. Yeah.
Fair enough. You're right.
See, that was their secret. They were the ones who didn't go to the bar. Remember?
Exactly. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, they were drinking their tea. Their tea's on, like with honey. And I was just like, oh yeah. They now that guy isn't even there for you either, man. That's gonna be like, Steel is in a bit of a. That's a tough place to be for him. I mean, yeah, you can't even blame any of them anyway. Any of those guys gets an offer from SK to move up to the SK realm. I mean, that's going to be it, right? I mean, but Bolts is I think it's going to play out the way that you hope it's going to play out, because he really, he doesn't even have to take over the game. He's coming into a team where he knows, I have 3 ridiculous fraggers with me. Like, I don't even need to take over the game. If I take over the game, it's just bonus. It's like Fox. It's like Fox at the E-League Major. It's just like he comes in. There should be no pressure on him to perform, because he knows that he's coming into a unit that's already full of killing machines. So now it's just about getting used to the communication, making sure you work out a couple of basic setups on whichever site you're going to be holding. Okay, flash here, smoke there. Cool, we good. Now just play. It's exciting. I like it.
And then the one other team to touch on is Gambit, because there's an interesting wrinkle with Gambit, which is that obviously... That was
just the only Russian?
When they shocked us all by doing so well in Malmo, where they beat Astralis, they got to the semis, they lost to North, they were a team where obviously they'd lost Zeus, and everyone's immediate reaction was like, well, you don't have an in-game leader now. Now, initially, they used Adren as the in-game leader, and it was good. It was up and down. Obviously, they didn't do that well at the Mykonos event. But apparently, they've now changed Dosia to the in-game leader. That's not a meme. That's apparently what they've actually done. But here's the thing. I noticed that I did look at that tournament that they played recently, I referenced before, and actually Adren's numbers are back to superstar numbers. So I have to say, I don't necessarily mind that trade-off. I have to say, I can't imagine a universe in which Dorsey is some like tactical mastermind and they're going to be really good in that sense. But first of all, that team's got a lot of firepower. So you probably could play a semi-loose star with that team. And secondly, a Dren being at superstar levels has to be a condition. You have to have that. Because if you don't, you're just wasting one of the biggest weapons in the team. Like having him be the in-game leader didn't make sense to me, you know.
Sure, it was like Shocks on G2. It's kind of a similar situation where it's like you got a man fragger, but you're hobbling him. I mean, this could be a similar situation to where things kind of fall into place and make sense, a la SK, where you're going to have a Dren, you're going to have Mo, you're going to have Hobbit. Those guys are going to go off and rip people's heads off, and then you've got Dojo who's going to call it, and Fitch is going to be there to kind of fill in the gaps. And you could definitely work in that sort of scenario where, you know, the roles are kind of defined and you know who needs to just hit frags and you know who's going to be setting those guys up to get those frags, and then everybody's hunky-dory and happy, right? I mean, it's tough in a group with like SK and perhaps FaZe. We don't know yet, but perhaps FaZe, you know, to just kind of say, oh, you know, to not overlook Gambit. Yeah. But I think that if they were to beat SK or FaZe, that it would be a bit of an upset, at least for me. I think that you gotta go with FaZe and SK as the favorites in this group, and that the other two, well, if they can win, that's going to be super sick. Best of three, right? Like you've said, okay, right? There's a chance, but to me, it's still an upset despite all this.
Yeah, that's the thing. Gambit's a bit of a weird team. I mean, obviously they have got the in-game leader issue, which you can never feel comfortable if you know a team doesn't have an established situation, because you can't then, like for example, if they've got a new in-game leader, I have to sort of throw out some of that stuff I saw at Malmo and saw at Mykonos and stuff, because now it's a different setup. So
sure.
you can't really feel like you know what they're all about. But I will say one thing that does really impress me about the Gambit team is like the firepower on that team is fucking legit. Like I don't know how were these Hobbit and Fitch just off playing in the middle of fucking nowhere, because both of them have now shown themselves to be really consistent, really good fraggers on LAN. So it just doesn't really make sense that players like that are out there. Well, here's the part. Essentially, here's the real thing, Semmler. So everyone's looking at Na'Vi right now, and they're struggling because they have to basically get electronic. That's it. There's no other options. They've got Zeus. They're in a bad situation. And yet it turns out apparently all these fraggers were out there just on bad teams.
And that's where you wonder, right? Like, is Na'Vi going to be the one to just self-destruct pretty soon here? I mean, C's stepping down. That's interesting to me. I'm curious to see how long Edward hangs in the game, if he's going to be a part of it much longer. Yeah, Na'Vi right now, that's a real tough one to go with. I mean, I don't personally subscribe to the idea of Zeus as this tactical mastermind or leader, great leader. So I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, Na'Vi are in a bit of an interesting spot. I know we're not supposed to talk about Na'Vi, I guess, but I mean, it's like, there you go.
No one can stop us.
No one can stop us. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's like the Na'Vi thing, man. It's a really interesting one. Just because it's like Simple gets frags, but and this isn't to put down Simple, but is he sucking the oxygen? Like, it's good that he's getting the frags, but if he were to get less or give more space to his teammates, would that help the team more than it all being based around Simple? I don't know. I feel like they're kind of all they're out of ideas right now. They're just kind of hoping that but we have Simple and he frags like a monster. And Flamey's ratings have gone up. His stats have gone up as well recently. But I mean, I don't think that's enough between the two of them. Like, they need Edward, they need Zeus, they need somebody to be stepping up and banging heads.
Do you have any final words? I think we'll just end the episode. Yeah. Sure,
if you like. I mean, just apart from watching episodes, it's a shame that we couldn't get a couch together this time, mate. Definitely disappointed with that. But
sure, some event in the future we'll manage it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually kind of excited to just sit and like spend an easy weekend just watching how all of this that we just talked about, how all of this unfolds.
Actually, I have to say that's something, Semmler, that people might think I was being sarcastic about. I have actually been fucking loving watching some of these tournaments just from home. Like, I was watching the E-League Premier Final. I was loving it. I just got everything set up. I had all my snacks. I was just sat there. I was warmed up. I was checking all the stats and stuff, getting myself in the mood for it. It was like when you're a kid and you've got some massive sporting event you're waiting for, the final of like Wimbledon or some fucking massive cup final in football. And you spend the day before, you're thinking about, tomorrow it's at that time, Then during the day, you're thinking about stuff. You're getting yourself hyped up. You're watching stuff. You're looking at articles and stuff. It's like, I've been enjoying it, actually. It's pretty fun.
It's a totally different experience. Like, it's nice to try and find that like happiness again with it, because when you're going at like work, there's like a different vibe, there's a different pressure, you have expectations, you don't get to do exactly what you want, obviously. You're trying to like marshal yourself for the match that you need to be really on point on for your commentary. And so then, it's a totally different beast from just being like, wake up, make myself some pancakes, sit down. Okay, I got my coffee, got my pancakes, got the stream. Life is Gucci, and all I have to do is just fucking sit here and enjoy. Like, that's really nice. Okay. So yeah, Epicenter, man. I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's going to be a hype event, considering you got like 7 out of the top 8 that are there.
Yeah. No, I mean, here's the funny thing. We've had a lot of events this year. I have to give credit. You see all these numbers being thrown around, like, the prize purse is actually less this year. At the moment, it's on track to be less than it was last year and stuff. Despite any factors that people might think are negatives, I think this year for actual tournaments, you can't blame the tournament organisers at all. There've been a bunch of them that have done this, where they've given a good format and they've got a really good group of teams. And at that point, if you're a tournament organiser, that's all you can do. Like, whether a tournament is legendary, unfortunately, is based on how the games play out. So sometimes you can do a terrible job with your tournament, and the games save you and you look amazing, So I obviously there's nothing I can blame from that sense. And I know people will always rate events by the games because they'll remember what they felt like. Basically, it makes sense. But this has all the makings of a fucking really good event, I think.
Oh, dude, absolutely. I mean, you got a great venue. St. Petersburg is going to be interesting. I mean, obviously the CIS fans, they're all going to be turning out in droves for this. So, I mean, I think that the venue itself, like the atmosphere there, is going to be pretty sick. But I mean, you can't really blame the TOs as well. I mean, everybody's like, the money's going down, but it's just like, but viewership has also slightly declined in CS over the year. And if you're a TO and if you're running a business, are you going to put more money into something when you realize we're getting this? There has to be diminishing returns at some point. Yeah. And so when it comes to like the prize money argument right now, I don't really see it. Like, there's so many tournaments. So if you're one TO, and like you say, right, it could be the difference between the games that really puts your event up and over. Maybe you drop another $100,000 on production. Did that make your event stand out if you had nothing but shit games, or was that $100,000 wasted, right? Like, a lot of TOs, that's how they think. And so I'm just glad that we still have fucking tournaments, like so many tournaments. What I would love to see is the complete and utter annihilation of online leagues. To me, give me LANs. Give me LANs every weekend. Hell yeah, all that. But like, get rid of the online. We don't need it. It doesn't do anything but wear the players out. Get rid of it. Let's all focus on LAN plays. Sadly, it's never going to happen because the TOs have literally built their business models on it. So yeah, exactly. There's no backing out now if you're a TO. You are literally committed to making Skrill on online leagues because that's where you have the highest margins for yourself, pretty much. So I mean, you're screwed. There's no backing out. But unfortunately, that to me means also a bit of a strain on the viewership for a game, because if there's no value in the games that are getting broadcast, and there's no reason that they stand out apart from the fact that they lead into something bigger. That's weak to me. It's weak, and it's not. No, it doesn't benefit anything.
The only way they're dropping online leagues, it would have to literally be something along the lines of Valve saying, like, right, we're going to give this, like, here's like $5 million, and we're going to split it among all the events, and you get this much, you get this much, and you get this much, because that'd be the only logical way as to how you could cut out the aspect. Because as you say, that is what the entire business is built off. Like, I realize to a fan, they don't get it. They think that ESL Pro League is because ESL is such a nice company. They want everyone in Europe to have a chance to qualify for the LAN. No. What they do is they have a business model called Run Pro League, and then they do a LAN at the end because that's how you make your event prestigious. Like, if you just ended with the online league, it wouldn't be considered as big a thing. They don't make the money from the LAN. Like, that's a pipe dream, anyone thinking that part. They do their best to recoup costs and make it probably break even, but that is not the money maker, So to me and you, I agree. We watch the online thing like, well, this is just a preamble. Let's get through this. Let's get to the LAN, But you have to realize from the tournament organizer's perspective, it's the other way around.
Well, what would be really interesting to see is E-League Major coming up. I don't know if this is, like, I need to double check, obviously, but like the tickets seem to be kind of high. Like $120 I've been hearing for tickets for general admission. So I mean, that's interesting because that's a step towards higher tickets on LAN, which has always been a problem for tournament organizers, is that they just can't sell tickets to like the price that they sell the tickets comes nowhere near to making up for the cost of actually running that LAN. And so that's always been the eternal struggle for TOs. But then also you have Blast Pro Series coming up as well. They aren't doing an online portion going into it. They're just coming up, wham bam, we're going to run a LAN, and it's going to be nice, tight, like one day, maybe it was like 1 day and a half, right? And try and just really hit that LAN experience and have an experience that's worth spending the money on behind it. So there's somebody else who's coming into the game with a bit of a different model, and we'll have to see if that works. But I feel like, Face It, ESL, DreamHack, well, not DreamHack have built their model on open, but like Face It in ESL have kind of just painted themselves into a corner now. So,
which is also what people don't realize. So, for example, when they announced the E-League major, the Boston major, I assume it's going to be called, I noticed there was a lot of complaining online that they announced it was like a 7,000-seater venue or something, because people were like, why isn't it like, Cologne or something where it's like a huge, 15,000 people can go? Well, think about this. Think about what we just told you about how the LAN event part works, right? I bet to get a venue that's 7,000 contrasted with a stadium that might be 20, 30,000 probably is like half as much to rent the venue and to add in all the extras. So if you rent the bigger venue, it's not that you just look silly when not as many people turn up, when that occasionally happens. Because first of all, there's no rhyme or reason at the moment. Nobody knows that they're getting all the people to come to the event. You never know when your event just doesn't sell, right? So when that happens, you also then don't recoup the costs. So now you're in an even worse position. So I realise I can't blame people from outside. It's tough to know a lot of these things. It takes a long time in the industry to learn them. But all I'm saying is just leave a little bit. Here's all you have to do, okay? When a tournament organiser's running an event, it's not that you can't judge them. You can judge based on what you know. But always leave a little gap for like, maybe I, a random person on the internet, don't know all the logistics of how an event runs. Just at least leave a little benefit of the doubt, Because the people doing these events know more than all the rest of us. I'm telling you.
There's factors that I hadn't even considered going into it obviously I hadn't. I was like, whoa, okay, this is interesting. It's like, how involved does a city get in you being there? Because the city will subsidize. If you work at it long enough and you build a relationship with that city and you're like, hey, let's tap into like the tourism side of things and the promotion side of things and all this sort of stuff. Like, how involved does a city get with it? It's like Oakland last year, you had guys in San Francisco, they had no idea the event was even happening. And yet, on the flip side, though, right? That's one ESL event. On the flip side, Cologne, everybody was like, oh shit, it didn't get the major. It's not going to sell. You kidding me? ESL, because I think that's an event now that has stood time. It's been here, same time, same place. It's been there long enough. Then again, they sold out again. They had a fantastic event and ESL managed to fill that stadium. Awesome. The big difference here is just like when you are trying to do this nomadic kind of way or it's like, okay, it's like pop-up stores for clothes or something, or restaurants or whatever, where it's just like, oh, we're here for a week, but you don't know, like, unless you're in the know, you're not going to know to be there, It's like, have E-League run an event in Boston so far for like 3 years running? No, they haven't. So do they want to try and be like, we're going to get a 15,000 seat stadium and expect to fill it on 2 months notice and expect everybody to be there? It's like, well, that's a scary proposition. You've never run an event there before. That's I could totally see it just being like, well, we take a smaller venue and we try and push as hard as possible on the marketing side of things and cross our fingers and hope. Whereas ESL, they don't really have to do that. Everybody knows Cologne, at least in the CS scene, right? Everybody knows Cologne. It's the biggest event, one of the biggest events of the year. So tickets almost sell themselves.
And also, just as I think this is a good closing note. I would also say, consider this factor as well, right? It took PGL a long fucking time to get their major. I think in part because them and DreamHack did the Cluj-Napoca one, which famously had a half-empty stadium where they'd sort of promised, like, hey, we're going to have an amazing crowd, So at the moment, it is absolutely cutthroat as to whether you get a major. So if you fuck up any little bit of the execution, you might not be getting the major. Because, for example, that was the last DreamHack major. DreamHack has not had a major in the 2 years since then. They haven't had any, and that's probably a factor. Now, it might not be all of it, sure. I'm sure pitches from other people were things that swayed Valve one way or the other. But at the moment, whoever hosts a major, you want to ensure crowd looks like it's really full and hype, the venue was good, the matches were hopefully good because of the set. You want to get everything right, because at the moment you can't make a misstep, because it's not just like it's not like the past where it's like DreamHack and ESL compete and maybe a third party. At the moment, everyone is competing. There's like 10 companies, people who don't even do events, like MLG are still coming on, like, I can get a venue and I can do this at this time. So at the moment, I can understand why people have scaled it down a bit, because you don't want to gamble as much. You want to just nail the execution.
And don't forget, make sure that Valve are happy. Like,
for sure,
you better make sure that those guys, when they're there and working your event, because that Valve are there, they're on location, they're setting up servers, they're making sure that everything on the tech side is working properly, that all of this big checklist, all the points have been ticked, all that sort of stuff. Just hearsay from what I've seen and talked to and all that, it's just like when they worked E-League last year, Valve, they were just like, okay, so we're done at 3 p.m. and E-League are like, yeah, everything's done. And Valver's like, are you sure? Yeah. You can go back to the hotel now if you want. You can do whatever you want. Whereas, like, I know for a fact, like, whatever DreamHacks in the past and everything, those guys were there until 3 a.m, busting ass trying to fix problems going into the tournament. So you can probably think that might have stepped, that might stick in Valve's mind as well. It's just like, we went to this event, it was awesome. We hardly did a thing. We went to this event and it was chaos and hell, which is probably going to be a bit of an influence as well, right? So I mean,
For sure, yeah.
that major circuit, man, that's as cutthroat as it gets right now in CS. All of those TOs, man, it's got to be sell their mums to get a better chance, even a better chance.
Yeah, it's just cutthroat. But my point, with our point here generally here is a lot of factors that some of them we still don't even know. So it's tough as the outside to judge,
Yeah, and by no means am I claiming that I know the game. Like just the other day, I was talking, and I had a conversation for an hour. I felt like I learned so much of things like I hadn't even considered before the past, as far as like how it works between a developer and a TO. And it's like, what? You learn all these sorts of, you just have to actually just sit and think on one particular topic, which is, for example, like, how do ESL approach developers? And then you sit and you think, like, how does this work, right? What is ESL's model? Because this is what I think about online leagues, right? And I was thinking, well, ESL painted themselves into a corner, but then it goes down the rabbit hole as far as the business side of things that starts to make a bit more sense in terms of, right, okay, they've invested this much in a studio in Los Angeles. Okay, how are they doing there? And then it's just like, but then Blizzard and Riot, and like way back in the day when Riot took all the production away from ESL had to scramble and figure out another way to make that money back, right? And all these sorts of things. I mean, you can just go on for days and you're just like, man, I am actually pretty fucking ignorant. There are so many things that you just have no idea about. Let's just cast some CS.
Hey guys, it's Fifth Lauren, also known as 944. Don't forget Thorin's YouTube channel.